I'm going to demonstrate how the new test cycle inside of test plans functionality works in 2.13.1. So first and foremost, you'll want to make sure that you have the latest version of Provar installed that has the test cycle functionality inside of test plans. You'll want to make sure you have at least one test plan. In this case, I have a couple. And you'll want to make sure that you have a test cycle. You can create a test cycle just by going down here to the test cycle tab and then adding a new test cycle, which will essentially just ask for a name and then a folder to put that test cycle in. What this looks like inside of Provar is it creates a test cycle folder with whatever test cycle you've specified here. So I have my report 1 cycle with nothing in it yet. Nothing has been executed. Then I have 2 test cases. One's going to fail and one's going to pass. So in the new version, you have now the capability to right-click on a test plan and export that as a build file, same as before. The only difference now is that there's now a test cycle tab where you can add in the ability to run test cycles and test plans together. So we can set it to run all test cases to retry here for failures. We can set it to run only failed test cases, and then we can set it to run failed and skipped test cases. Just a quick note on these options. If you choose either of the bottom 2 options and no test cases are in that test cycle yet, it'll run all of them. And then on the next run, it'll evaluate these conditions. In the first one, of course, it's always going to run all test cases, and then it'll have retry logic in there. So whatever fits your requirements the best, that's what you'll want to generate this as. I'll demonstrate it in this case. So let's say we only want to rerun our failed test cases. We'll create a build file here, make sure we have the test plan selected here, and everything else is set up correctly. So we'll just export that. All right, so this is what our build file looks like here. So we can see it has added our test cycle path here, and it's also added it into the run test case section along with the test cycle run type, which is failures. Here's our test plan that we're going to be executing with all the traditional test plan output. So we can see that there. So now if we want to run this particular test plan using that build file that we just created, we can go to our ant directory where that build file is. So here we have our build.xml. If we look at our results, we currently have 2 result folders, so it's going to increment, create a new one. We don't have anything in the test cycle, so we won't see anything there. So again, on the first execution, if we go ahead and run this, it's going to pick up our test plan and it's going to run all the test cases. So we see we have 1 passed, 1 failed. And if we go to our results here, we'll see that we have a new folder created for that single execution. If we go to our test cycles now, we'll see that we have some results in here as well. So it'll have the results for every single test case zipped up, which will contain the actual failures or the results of that individual test case. Now if we run this again, this time it's going to pick up the test cycle and it's going to say that it's only going to run the test cases that have failed. So in this case, we'll get a single test execution and we'll get to see a failure here. So we have 0 successful, 0 skipped, and 1 failed. So now if we go back into our results here and refresh this, we'll see we have another execution. Except this time it's only executed the failed test case because of what we specified here. The other option we have is if we want to run all the test cases. So we can export this as another file. Let's say keep all of this, go to our test cycle. Let's say we want to run all test cases and we want to retry for failures. So if we export this, we'll just override our existing build.xml. This is what it looks like. Again, the only difference here is that the test cycle run type is set to all. So this is the initial execution. So it's going to run all the test cases at least once. And then based on the status of those, it's going to rerun all failed and skipped test cases 1 time. So this is what test cycles are initially used for, so we can use them now in conjunction with test plans. All right, so let's look at our results folder. So we have 4 here. We'll go ahead and clean out our test cycles so we have a clean start there. And let's go over to execute these. So it's going to run both of the test cases initially once, and then we'll see it's going to do a re-execution of the failed test case. So we have 2 executions here that are happening in the same run. So because it did a retry logic there on the failed test cases. So if we quickly refresh, we'll see we have 2 different executions now. The first execution, if we take a look at that, we can see it ran our test cases here. So we'll see our outcome for our tests. We have 1 passed, 1 failed. And then if we look at our other report here, we'll be able to see that we have a single failure. So what it's done is basically it's run all the test cases initially, regardless of their current test cycle status, and then based on the failures or skips inside of that run, it'll rerun those. So it's all been consolidated now, so you can utilize test plans in conjunction with test cycles to have some retry logic while taking advantage of all the functionality that we have with test plans as well. The consolidation of the reporting has still not been completed. However, you'll be able to at least include this part of the functionality in your testing.